But the churches all over the place, and all of them have these white images. Everything is white. Nothing to indicate there was an African presence anywhere in the land. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, first let's look at the land and try to get some kind of perspective on what Israel was like during the Bible time. Abraham. Who is this Abraham? Where does it come from? Let's talk about it, and let's hold the land of Canaan and Palestine in perspective. If you can give us some overview and background.
I want to approach it in several different directions. One is, since it's the one we're most familiar with, the biblical direction. And in the book of Genesis, when it goes over the genealogies of human beings, according to the Israelite view, it says that Ham, who was noted as the ancestor of the Africans, and we're not going to deal with the curse of Ham here now, because that was not in the original Genesis record. We're just going to deal with Ham as a great ancestor according to Hebrew tradition. That his sons were, he had 4 sons, and they were Cush, Mizraim, Punt, and Canaan. Now, Cush, we know, came to be known as Ethiopia. Cush, the Cushite Empire, spread all over the world. But that was the Hebrew name for them. They probably had another name for the Nuba, was the proper name for the people. Nuba, because they came from Nubia. The Mizraim was the Israel Hebrew way of saying Kemet, or as the Greeks later called it, Egypt. And Punt was their way of saying Puanet, which was Somalia. And Canaan was that on the Palestinian Strip. Now, interesting thing about Canaan is that Canaan is right there at the tip of the Fertile Crescent. Now, the heart and center of that Fertile Crescent is in the Nile. That was the richest producing soil in the world at that time. So why many people wanted that Palestinian strip of the land of Canaan is because of the wealth there at the tip of it. This biblical version lets you know that the Canaanites were in fact descendants of Ham, who everybody generally agrees were African people, Africoid people. The word Canaan itself is describing they're also called Phoenix, which describes a red, purple, or mahogany-colored people. That's what Canaan and Phoenix mean. The two words are synonymous. Now, this strip was very vital because whenever the Asian would attack Africa, they would have to cross Canaan to get to it. And whenever the African was going to repel the Asian, or to stop the Asian in their tracks, or to conquer Asian territory, they would go across that bridge. Now, the Hebrews who came in the days of Abraham, and I want to get this clear understanding, there was no Hebrew in the world before Abraham. And the proper term is Harabu, as Dr. Yusuf Bento-Channon writes in African Origin of Major Western Religions. And it meant one who had crossed over the river. And that is because Abraham came from a place called Ur of Chaldea, which was the remnants of the ancient Sumerian Empire, the land of what they called the blackheads, or the black-headed people. They were very black people. He came out of that land. Now, we assume that he was a black man, but even if he wasn't, his descendants spent over 430 years in Africa mating with Africans, and was only 77 of them under Jacob who went there, and they come out 3,160,000 strong in Egypt. Yeah, or what they misnomer Egypt, in Kemet, but what the Bible calls Egypt. So, but we can, I think, safely assume that Abraham was indeed a black man. He originated from Ur of Chaldea, not out of the sky, not of any place else. And also, just to put a footnote here, the oldest bones, the oldest remains dating about 50 to 70,000 years that have been found in Palestine, where Canaan was, in the Palestinian Strip, are Africoid in all their features. From the osteological study, it shows dolichocephalia, the long-haired stereotypagea, the big ample posterior. From the bones we can tell all of that. The platyrinia, the broad nose, the thick lips, all of these are Africoid features. These are the oldest features in the land. At that time that Abraham was traveling out of Ur of Chaldea, the Europeans or even the Eurasians had not settled in any significant amount in the land. They had made incursions and attacks, but they had not settled. And one of the reasons why Abraham was leaving Ur of Chaldea was because the word was out that the Scythians were going to attack that land again, what is called Chaldea. They were going to attack that land. The Greeks called it Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Now these Scythians were Indo-Europeans who, when they went to battle, they went buck naked wearing a black cape. And the first person they felled in battle, they bit them in the neck and sucked the blood out of them to get their power and strength as a symbol of their conquest over that person. Now, they had attacked Chaldea 200 years earlier, and Abraham heard the devastation that they brought. So he knew that they were coming in, so he decided to leave. Now, in order for him to settle in Canaan, he had to go to the nation or the empire that had control over that land at the time, that was Kemet. So he had to go into Kemet and get permission from the officials, not the Pharaoh, because Abraham was not of a status that he could stand before the Pharaoh and speak to him. You had to be a world dignitary to do that, and he wasn't. He wasn't even a tribal leader yet. He didn't even have a good clan at present. He wasn't even a chieftain at this time. This was in the year approximately 1675 BCE. That's before the Common Era. This is the first Hebrew anywhere that gets permission from the Kemetans, and he goes and begins to settle with his family in Canaan. Now, it's doubtful that he had over, we would be generous to say he had 20 people in his family at the time. So that is the beginnings. Now, he has a son called Isaac, and Isaac has a son, and he also has a son called Ishmael. He has Isaac by Zerah, who is from Ur of Chaldea, a black woman, probably, on all probability. We know that Hagar is a black woman from out of Kemet, because Kemet was predominantly black people. There was no more than 10% or 11% white population there at any time, and that was mostly during the days of the Greeks, and this is long before the Greeks come. And he had two sons by these two women, and Isaac had Jacob. And in the days of Jacob had 12 sons who became the patriarchs of the 12, what later became the 12 tribes of Israel. These are all black people we're talking about here now. Now, Jacob is living in Palestine at a time, according to the Genesis record, a famine strikes. And so he has to go to the place that has the most abundance of food. Everybody's flocking to that place at that time, and that's Africa, the continent of Africa, to Kemet. So he goes to Kemet and settles there. And his family, and it's only 70 to 77 of them when they go in. I want you to understand that. It's only 70 to 7 of them. In all probability, they were black people. We have no doubt about that. But even if they weren't, when they went in only 70 to 77, and they come out, they stay there in the Nile Valley for 430 years, according to their records. Now, there's no record of them being enslaved. And had they been enslaved, had there been that many slaves there, they would have, because they came out over 3 million strong, had they been slaves, it would have been recorded, because the Kemetans recorded everything. Even if they hadn't recorded it, Persia would have recorded it, India would have recorded it, because they were recording everything in the world there. They were literate people. But they come out, the Bible says, the Exodus record says, that they come out 600,000 men, plus women and children. The average family consisted of 5 children at that time. They had a lot of children. Many of them had several wives. So we can safely estimate it's 3,100,000 and some odd thousand coming out there. They are essentially African, with an African religion, because their leader at the time is Moses. And Moses is described by Jethro's daughters as an Egyptian. They don't describe him as an Asian or anything. They describe him as an Egyptian. And the Egyptian was noted for